KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
We may be witnesses to a biblical prophecy come true, and there shall be destruction and darkness come up in creation, and the beast shall reign over the earth.
Welcome back to listener-supported KPBS Cinema Junkie. I'm Beth Accomando. April brings two of my favorite film festivals, and this year they both ended up on the same weekend. There's the TCM Classic Film Festival in Hollywood and the San Diego Asian Film Festival Spring Showcase here in San Diego. First up, I want to talk to Ben Burt and Craig Barron about their presentation at the TCM Film Festival. Craig and Ben both come from an effects background, but I asked them to elaborate on how they come from different ends of the spectrum. Ben working in sound design and Craig in visual effects.
Yeah, well, I think the idea is that we complement ourselves as a team. And it started back when we were researching some of the Academy Awards that were given to visual effects movies. And Ben pointed out that the Visual Effects Award was also the Audio Effects Award, meaning that the film would receive an award for the sound effects and for the visual effects. And so that sort of led us to discuss why and get involved in making presentations. And then we just sort of kept doing that. I think that basically in creating illusions, there's the visual component and the audio component. So we work together and we sort of talk shop and discuss how something was created. We like to look back at traditional filmmaking techniques, some of which we've moved on to digital, but we love the originals because that's what inspired us to want to get involved in making films.
Both of us are film lovers and film historians. And this gave us a chance. I think at some point, part of the motive for doing it was a conversation like, hey, Craig, what would you like to see? You know, if we could get a nice print, get the Academy or someone to get a nice print for us or TCM. And we'd pick a title, Adventures of Robin Hood or something. And that was an opportunity to host a screening for a favorite film. So there was that aspect of it as well. As Craig has said, the final illusion in any movie is picture and sound together. And so we would bring together, come down those roads and kind of intersect to take a look at the final results in any movie. But we've since expanded our interest as well. Sometimes we'll talk about stunt work, like when we did Mad, 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 Mad World, or we did a whole program on aviation once, and we really talked about aviation history and how the 100 years from the Wright brothers onward, film and aviation developed together and had a huge cultural impact. So we have not limited ourselves to just special effects.
And this year you have chosen them. So what led to this decision?
We love giant ants.
Nature, mad, rampant, wrought its most awesome creation. For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous. There is no word to describe them.
One of the premises of our show is that we try to unearth rare or unseen information about the making and the behind-the-scenes activity of a film. So we have been very interested in the science fiction films that we saw as kids, the science fiction films of the 1950s, that kind of classic era. And we've done War of the Worlds and When Worlds Collide. So them was just on our list for a number of years, but we didn't bring it forward until we knew we could find some new and interesting stories about how it was made to reveal to our audience. We finally found some material, and that sort of triggered this for this year's festival.
Yeah, we sort of have an agreement that unless we can find something that we feel we can bring to it that's more unique and different, we really don't want to do the title. But somehow we sort of, once we focus in on something, we do tend to come up with material. And we often say, well, I don't think we're going to be able to find anything interesting about that title, but somehow we always look back afterwards and go, hey, that was a pretty good show. We tend to love the process of discovery. We kind of call it an architectural dig.
Archaeological dig, yeah.
Archaeological dig, yeah, sorry about that. And we sort of have called our series Secrets from the Hollywood Archives because we love to go and see if there's material that perhaps hasn't been shown before, or in some way revealing the creative process. Because most of the people that made these movies really didn't have a chance to talk about them. And so we'd love to sort of reveal their creative process. As someone who, as a team, both Ben and I admire these films. As Ben said, they inspired us to want to be filmmakers.
The films in the classic era of Hollywood, there's very little documentation about behind the scene crafts. What has survived is stories of the stars and maybe the major directors, but finding information on how the visual effects were achieved, or very rare, any kind of sound work on the film, is extremely hard to find, and only shows up in the rarest instances.
Our first program was a film called The Rains Came, which received the visual effects Oscar in 1939. And when you look back at 1939, you go, well, gee, there were The Wizard of Oz and The Gone with the Wind. I mean, 1939 was considered the high point of studio system production. And the film that we chose is the obscure one that nobody knows about. Why did this film win an Oscar over the other much more popular and well-known movies? So we'd love to find that sort of more interesting approach to the material that we present.
I don't want you to give away anything from this year's presentation, so I don't want you to have to reveal any spoilers, but talk a little bit about that kind of research and what access are you getting to studio archives, or where else are you finding information?
So there's no real one way. Some things come from the studio archives. Sometimes there are stock shots. Sometimes there's private collections. Obviously, we have a very close working relationship with the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and their archives. But it's really a matter of, since Ben and I both talk shop, we sort of have a way to understand how we can use the material and adapt it with an explanation that the audience can understand. So there are a lot of things that are in archives that maybe somebody doesn't know what they are, that we can kind of find and add value to by discovering it.
We've had a good relationship with the archives at Paramount and the film library at Warner Brothers. We have people there that know what we're looking for and know what interests us. And so on occasion, when they discover something, or we go to them with a question, they're able to assist in going into the vaults, finding some cans of material, whatever, that we can look at.
And they hardly ever hang up anymore.
Yeah, they don't have, right. Yeah, we go to like USC Special Collections has a lot on the Warner Brothers. We go to the George Eastman House collection in Rochester, and we make inquiries there. We will talk to fans and collectors who might have set something aside, an article or an artifact about a science fiction film or something we're pursuing. And so we kind of do the usual shopping among all these sources.
And these are, broad collections, which are what's so great about them. It's there to find, and it's protected, quite often not really knowing if it'll have some further purpose in the future. We try to find the value of those items and bring them to light for the public, for their enjoyment and appreciation in the craft of making movies and the people that came before us.
And just to give people an idea of the lengths that you guys go to, talk a little bit about what you did for When Worlds Collide and really changing that whole kind of audio experience we were having in the theater.
Yeah, Ben got a little out of control on that one.
Yeah, we did talk about maybe creating a giant ant to come on stage with us.
Well, there was the flamethrower idea.
Yeah, we actually found the flamethrower prop, but we just couldn't figure out how to use live fire on stage. and make sure it was safe and affordable. We are minor showmen. We try to do something beyond just a lecture of material. We want to find interesting photographs. We want to have guests on occasion. We'll have a guest. We had Robbie the Robot years ago when we did Forbidden Planet. That was a very rare event. We have Richard Bellis, who is a young child actor who was in Them. We have a video interview with him. He's not attending, but so we try to search and find anything we can to find firsthand stories if they exist about the behind the scenes craftsmanship in these films.
And you didn't mention you did Ben surround sound, right? Isn't that what you called the When Worlds Collide?
Last year we were thinking of what kind of gimmick might be attached to our show to make it once again deliver a
not gimmick, value added.
Okay, value added experience, like William Castle would do, But it came about because the film seemed to offer some events in it for sound.
Ship is moving. Stand by.
Rumble of a rocket, the rumble of an earthquake, and the destruction of the Earth. And George Powell had said in interviews back at the time that they wanted to get as much low-end theaters could play at that time with a different technology. And so we felt that we could further his dream and still not be disrupting his intention of producing that film, and add a huge rumble. There was a sense around years ago in the 70s, which was a Universal had a system to add a huge low frequency rumble during the earthquake movies, and we wanted something like that. So fortunately, it worked out that we were able to Boston Light and Sound, who set up the festival, he went over the top and gave us just what we wanted to generate a Ben surround track.
Yeah, in the rehearsals we had to tone it way down. If you wanted to keep all your teeth after the screening.
But the building is still standing.
It is, but we did blow the doors open at one point because of the positive pressure, and that was...
It did push the doors open.
And Ben had to turn that knob. He turned it past 11 at that one point, and he's got to put a blocker on that because you just can't help it,
Well, it's a sound man. We're dangerous when you give us that knob, so...
And for people who may not have ever attended a TCM film festival, can you give a sense to them of why this festival feels so special and why you guys devote all this time to creating these amazing programs?
It's the group experience that people don't get as much nowadays. That is the group experience of watching a motion picture with a crowd of people all paying attention in a darkened room. The way that was the intention behind the exhibition of the classic films that the festival presents. And those of us that saw films in theaters when that was your only choice, and television was not qualitative enough and so on, remember those experiences. And so the gathering of fans together to appreciate a film or discover a new film is really, I think, the energy that's the payoff for people attending the festival. And for us, it's the same thing. We want to be there to share what we know with an audience and then present the film for the audience to enjoy.
I mean, for me, it's absolutely my favorite film festival. And people from all over the world come to Hollywood for the festival. There are local people, of course, but people from all over are coming and enjoying it who are really film fans and love classic movies. And it's exposing classic movies to another generation of young people who are coming to these festivals and seeing these films on the big screen. It's wonderful to watch TCM because you get to see things that maybe you've never seen before, or something will be on, you go, oh, I've never seen that before. That's interesting. But to actually go into a theater and see it with people that want to see the film and are excited to be there is just a fantastic experience, and we're so happy to be a part of that. sometimes people come up to us afterwards and say they just really appreciate knowing a little bit more about how the classic films were made in a slightly different approach that we like to take. We like to talk shop, because I work in visual effects, Ben does sound, and we can kind of interpret what the tools and techniques that the classic filmmakers were using, which for the most part is starting to be receding into the past, and that information is starting to get lost. So we want to kind of revisit it whenever we can.
That was Craig Barron and Ben Burt. They'll be presenting them at the TCM Film Festival on Friday. Now I talk to Brian Hu, Artistic Director of the San Diego Asian Film Festival. Their spring showcase starts today. And first off, I wanted him to talk about the number of films that are really designed for cinephiles.
Right. And I'm going to say, there were even more that didn't make it into the festival that I really wanted. It was starting to turn into, this was going to be a meta festival of movies about movies. But you're right. I mean, as people who live and breathe movies, as much as we love movies, we love talking about movies. We love remembering movies, thinking about the history of films. So yeah, we have a film called Celluloid Underground, which is this really exciting documentary out of the UK. And it's an Iranian director who is based in the UK. And he remembers growing up and wanting to learn more about the world, wanting to learn more about cinema, but it's hard to find films from around the world in Iran, especially after the revolution. And so he somehow stumbled upon this guy who has a huge trove of 16 millimeter prints and 35 millimeter prints that he just sort of hid underground, literally under the streets of Tehran. Because after the revolution, you're not allowed to have these private stashes of films. But because of this person's kind of intrepid cinephilia, an entire generation of just curious cinephiles were able to see the films of the world. And so this film collector died recently, and this director who's now in exile in the UK wanted to make this film in tribute to this mysterious man and this influential pot of celluloid gold.
That sounds amazing. It sounds very similar to the one the Latino Film Festival did of Pictures of Ghosts, where it's just celebrating kind of film in all its variations, whether you're making it, watching it, going to a cinema church, whatever.
Yeah, and especially when, in this case, the church was kind of the place where you find contraband. It's sort of an illegal church, which adds an extra layer of intrigue to this documentary.
And there's also films where it is simply a narrative film within a film kind of structure.
Okay, stand by. Action!
Yeah, we have a film called Falling in Love Like in Movies. It's a film from Indonesia. And it was one of the most acclaimed films from Indonesia last year. And partly because it's so smart, in a Christopher Nolan kind of way. It's sort of like a film within a film, where a guy is a screenwriter. He's tired of having to just make these terrible adaptations of soap operas. He's like, no, it's time for me to write my own original script. But the thing is, he wants to make a romance, and he's going through a bit of a romantic, he's having a kind of a romantic story of his own, and he's starting to write his real life into the script. And so there's these two layers, at least two layers, maybe even more layers in the film of what is reality, what is the film he's making, in the film he's pitching to this big producer. And it's just really fun to see kind of how one's ideals of romance and one's ideals of filmmaking collide.
And I love the way that you will focus on different countries. And this year you have a focus on Tibet, which I think is a country that a lot of people may not have seen a lot of films from.
We may have seen films shot in Tibet by Hollywood, for instance, right? Like Martin Scorsese's made film in Tibet and so on. And China actually makes films in Tibet, but in a way that's sort of the Tibetans are cute, exotic people. And actually Hollywood's version is not that different from that either. What we haven't seen are films made by Tibetans. And I mean, this is a relatively new phenomenon because it requires a generation of Tibetans to start going to film school, start to become more and more cine literate. And really the first director to try this out is this feature filmmaker named Pema Tedin, whose films they did not resemble anything like what Hollywood was making or what the Chinese film industry was making. In some ways, they're perfectly fine, right? They're not really politically dangerous movies. They're just about Tibetans in their ordinary lives. But there's something about them that because they're from a very different point of view, they don't have that kind of exotifying gaze that the Chinese people in China have, or like Westerners have of Tibet, that they sort of disrupt our expectations of what a Tibetan narrative can be. And he is pretty sly about like how do you get politics in these films without it being about politics. And as a result, he became world famous, especially on the International Film Festival circuit. His films have played the Venice Film Festival. They've won awards. And unfortunately, he died last year. He was only in his 50s. He was so young and beloved all around the world. We've shown several of his films at the San Diego Asian Film Festival before, but we haven't shown all of them. And we haven't shown his newest film. So his newest and final film called Snow Leopard, which is an incredible kind of allegory about what happens to animals in Tibet. And so this is our chance to pay tribute to some of the films we haven't shown and to his latest one.
And even that one has a bit of a self-aware film within a film quality to it as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's about like there's a news crew so basically the story is the snow leopard has infiltrated a sort of a stable and has killed some farm animals. The question is, what do we do with the snow leopard now? And so there's like kind of cultural clashes, and then a news crew shows up, and so it's also about how does one tell the story. Like this question of how does one tell the story is very much on the forefront. So again, another kind of like a film about the ethics of filmmaking.
And I noticed there's also something new that's not exactly a film event, the poetry.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have linked up with Jason Mugabo Perez, who happens to be the San Diego Poet Laureate right now. And I mean, he's been coming to the San Diego Asian Film Festival for a long time, and we thought, hey, this would be a good way for us to collaborate. So it's kind of going to be a sort of free-flowing poetry jam. He and several other poets from the area or from throughout California are going to do their thing at a film festival. And so it's going to be at the venue, just a lot of creative energy. We like our films poetic, but sometimes we just like poetry. and so why not host an event like this?
And there's one other local connection for the festival this year, which is a film called Smoking Tigers.
Smoking Tigers is directed by So-Young Shelley Yo, who is a UC San Diego alum. She did her undergrad here. She studied communication and visual arts. And we've sort of known about her through her short films. And I believe that she once was a volunteer for our film festival. This is like a long time ago before I was even involved. So no conflict of interest or anything. But we've been following her career, doing short films. And then last year, she was at the Tribeca Film Festival, world premiering this movie, Smoking Tigers. And it won Best Screenplay. It won Best Acting Performance. It's a very Southern California, Korean-American story about this one family. They're not that well-to-do, and they realize that, like if we want our daughter to get ahead in the world, she needs to do well on her SATs. So it's about like this kind of SAT camp that she's forced to go on. But instead of learning about, math and verbal, she's learning the ways of the world, specifically how the much richer Korean American kids live and sort of where her place is within that. We're very excited to have Shelley coming to our festival for a Q&A. The actress who's in the film who won the award at Tribeca, she'll be here as well.
Well, once again, you've lined up an amazing array of films for the festival. So thank you very much for both programming it and talking about it.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps up another edition of KPBS Listener-Supported Cinema Junkie. If you enjoy the podcast, then please share it with a friend, because your recommendation is the best way to build an addicted audience. You can also help by leaving a review. Till our next Film Fix, I'm Beth Accomando, your resident cinema junkie.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.